The night became unusually quiet, but Olivia's coronary heart changed into anything but calm. She sat alone at the sofa, her eyes constant at the clock, ticking gradually on the wall. The silence of the residence, once her sanctuary, now felt heavy, oppressive, almost as though it had been preparing her for something unbearable. She knew Ethan become overdue again. She knew the faint hint of every other female's fragrance could cling to his clothes whilst he sooner or later walked via the door. But regardless of all of the betrayal, all the sleepless nights spent crying silently, all the humiliation she had persisted over the last 12 months of marriage, Olivia hung on to the fragile desire that tonight would possibly somehow be unique. That by some means, Ethan could come home, observe her with the equal warm temperature he once did, and the entirety would be forgiven. Her fragile hope shattered on the spot the front door burst open with a noisy, competitive bang. Ethan stormed in, his laughter echoing via the spacious residing room, but he became not by myself. Any other voice followed light, playful, formidable, and unashamed. Madison. Olivia's chest tightened, and her frame went bloodless. She gripped the edge of her sweater, growing slowly, her eyes widening in disbelief. Ethan hadn't simply brought Madison domestic. He had brought her into their home as although it belonged to her, as though Olivia herself were invisible. The audacity stung like hearth throughout her skin, deep, uncooked, and painful. Ethan's arm became draped round Madison's waist, his hand possessive and intimate, and the two of them gave the look of a pair coming back from a romantic nighttime out. Ethan didn't even look at Olivia to start with, too busy whispering something in Madison's ear that made her snicker, her laughter reducing through Olivia's chest like a knife. While he finally looked at Olivia, there was no disgrace, no remorse, only mockery. Without a word, Ethan grabbed Madison's clothier purse and flung it throughout the room. It landed with a loud thud on the polished wooden floor. The act wasn't accidental. It changed into deliberate, humiliating, and intended to show Olivia's worthlessness within the most harsh terms possible. Then his eyes locked onto Olivia's. "Get out!" He spat, his voice sharp, venomous, very last. Olivia blinked, taken aback. Her lips parted. However, no phrases got here. "What? What do you mean?" she ultimately whispered, slightly audible. Ethan stepped nearer, pointing at her as even though she had been a stranger intruding into her personal domestic. "I said, get out of my house." I am carried out feeding a lazy female, who does nothing, however, take a seat right here like a parasite. He grew to become the Madison, a cruel sneer twisting into something almost like admiration. "Take a look at Madison. This is a real lady." "No longer you." Madison tilted her chin proudly, smirking as if she had just been crowned queen of the house. Olivia's throat tightened. Warm tears pooled in her eyes, but she fought them back, forcing herself to stay upright. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I am your spouse. We made vows. Don't try this to me. Don't humiliate me like this in my personal domestic." Ethan's face hardened, cold and unyielding. He folded his palms, concerning her like an object to discard. "Enough! PC, your matters. This is now not your own home. I need you gone tonight." Her knees weakened. She located a hand towards the wall for assist, her mind spinning in disbelief. Was this certainly occurring? The person who had as soon as promised her for all time now stood before his mistress, stripping Olivia of her dignity and love in one fast, brutal movement. Madison laughed gently, a cruel, successful sound that cut via Olivia's chest like glass. "Didn't you listen to him?" Madison said, mockery dripping from her words. "It's over. Some of us don't beg to be stored. We recognize our really worth." Ethan chuckled, pulling Madison closer, displaying her like a trophy. Olivia's tears ultimately spilled, hot and unrelenting. She shook her head slowly, coronary heart breaking into portions too sharp to mend. However, even within the ache, a spark interior her shifted, a fire Ethan may want to never see. She became without every other phrase and walked to the bedroom, her steps heavy, however deliberate. Internal, she opened the cloth cabinet and pulled out an unmarried purse. She didn't take her earrings. She didn't take her luxurious footwear. no longer greater than dresses. She left in the back of the entirety that tied her to a person who had betrayed her so completely. Ethan observed, his voice dripping with venom. Sure, take that useless bag of yours and depart. Cross finds somewhere else to beg. I don't need to lick your face right here again. Olivia zipped the bag slowly, taking deep, controlled breaths to prevent herself from breaking down. She had cherished this guy with all her being. But now, he was not anything extra than a stranger who had found out the darkest corners of his coronary heart. While she returned into the dwelling room, Madison became lounging on the couch, claiming the gap as though it had constantly been hers. Olivia paused, searching at Madison, then at Ethan. She desired to scream, curse, fight for her vicinity, but she didn't. Alternatively, she whispered softly, "May God choose between us," and stepped out of doors into the cool night air. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her telephone. With shaky hands, she dialed a number she not often used. Minutes later, the silence of the road becomes shattered with the aid of the low rumble of drawing near engines. Sleek SUVs appeared, their headlights cutting through the darkness like sharp blades. The black gates of her compound swung open, and the convoy entered with precision. One of the drivers jumped out right away, rushing towards her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, challenge etched throughout his face. Olivia didn't agree with herself to talk. She in reality nodded and slid into the return seat of the primary SUV. As the door shut softly behind her, she whispered one phrase to the motive force: "Domestic." The automobiles rolled easily out of the compound, engines buzzing powerfully as they disappeared into the night time. Inside, Olivia returned towards the leather seat, her eyes fixed on the town lighting fixtures flashing by means of through the tinted window. Her reflection stared lower back at her tear-streaked face, but additionally at a newfound power Ethan had by no means noticed. And then, for the primary time that nighttime, a small, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. Ethan concept he had received. He notioned he had discarded a vain girl and changed her with a person better. But what he didn't understand, what he couldn't even consider, was that the female he had simply thrown out wasn't normal. Olivia wasn't only a housewife. She became the billionaire CEO secretly owning the very company. Ethan worked for the identical business enterprise he had bragged about, the one that gave him a false feel of superiority. She had hidden her identity deliberately to see who Ethan absolutely became while stripped of wealth and status. And now she had seen. She had visible the person behind the masks. And tomorrow, Ethan's global could disintegrate due to the fact less than 24 hours from now, you might stroll into the office with Madison on his arm and find Olivia ready, status tall, radiant, and effective. Not as his discarded wife, but as his billionaire boss. Olivia closed her eyes, an unmarried tear sliding down her cheek. This was now not a tear of ache. It turned into a tear of clear up. The sport had handed just all started. Ethan, oblivious, laughed in the dwelling room with Madison, happy with the chaos he had triggered. But he had no idea that via morning, the ground beneath him might shift. He become approximately to face the only humiliation from which there might be no restoration.